Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Business of Sports Show. Today's going to be a fantastic episode. I've been looking forward to this as a lifelong Scarlets fan. It is great to have the man at the top on the show today. We have Simon Muderack, who is the brand new chairman of the Scarlets Rugby Club. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. I appreciate the enthusiastic introduction.
Well, we've been talking beforehand, and we'll get into the rugby side of things shortly. But first of all, introduce yourself, because I've kind of looked through your history, and it's a really interesting history. So introduce yourself to everyone who might not necessarily know you.
Yeah, let me give it a shot. So taking over at the Scarlets, or moving into the executive chairman role, a bit of a pivot for me, a bit of a left field move. I just have been through a 25-year career in technology. I'm actually from West Wales, so from Llanelli. Been a lifelong Scarlet supporter. Was brave enough to step over the bridge and go over to Bath for university in the early 90s, at a time when Bath had a fantastic rugby team and were doing incredibly well. So I'm actually not one of those Welsh people that hates English rugby. I just love rugby in general. Then moved down to London, and I've travelled fairly extensively across the world. I did about 10 years in professional services, working for a large blue chip company, doing technology implementations all around the globe. And then about 15 years ago, I set up a software business based here in the UK, was chief executive of that company for around about 9 years. Venture capital backed, multiple rounds of venture capital finance, ended up selling the business to a North American, actually a Canadian-based company. In 2013, stayed with that business, helped sell that company to private equity in 2015, and then in 2019 ended up completely selling the company out to a publicly listed business. And after about a year of transition, I left the company. I'd been talking to the Scarlets for a month or so. They were running a professional recruitment process. And in combination with CVC finalizing their investment, so private equity coming into the game, the discussions around changes to the global season, and COVID, I thought it would be a phenomenal time to get involved in the game. Clearly there's lots of challenges, and COVID has dominated a massive amount of time that I've spent working with the club over the past couple of months. But I'm very optimistic about the long-term future of the game. For me, I am a rugby fan, but I'm not a rugby business person. I am a business person. But I think rugby is now at a pivot point itself. As am I personally, where it is becoming a real business. Clearly, private equity think that's the case, and they think there's a phenomenal opportunity for the sport. So it's a really exciting time for me to get involved with rugby, and particularly, when it's my home club and a club that I've supported passionately, really for the entirety of my life, the Scarlets.
Yeah, what a time to be taken over. To really take the hot seat when the apocalypse is happening in the world with COVID, and then you take on the challenge of Welsh rugby. I mean, you're certainly one for punishment, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we can smile and laugh about it, and you have to be optimistic and look for the positives that are going to come out of this. Clearly, COVID has been an issue for many, many people all across the world. I mean, I think it's unique in terms of the unilateral nature of its impact, and I completely recognise that for many people, 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year. For rugby, it's been incredibly difficult too. It's widely publicised in the press. For the year 2019, the Scarlets were one of only 2 professional clubs in the United Kingdom that were profitable. It was us and Exeter. And, profit's not a massive focus for us. We want to be a sustainable business. The reality is any profit, which we actually talk about as surplus, we reinvest back into the game. We're not here to generate oodles of cash and strip that out. Rugby at best is a break-even sport within today's world. I do see that changing, as private equity help the business develop and prosper into the future. But then coming into COVID, nobody's going to be profitable. Nobody's going to be sustainable. It's widely publicised, the professional game in Wales, the distribution that comes from the central pot, the WRU in our case, has been dramatically reduced. We are on the hook to pay the players' salaries. In normal circumstances, the WRU would contribute greatly towards that. They're not able to do that this year, and the burden's been passed back onto us. We're still providing those players to the international squads to support the autumn series, and then after Christmas, the Six Nations and beyond that. So the financial burden on us has been very, very significant. We are working through it. We will survive. The trick is not just surviving this year, but being in a position where going into next year, as we hopefully re-emerge from COVID and crowds come back together and the new TV deals get put into place and sponsors are able to return their support for the game, and supporters are able to show their appreciation and sharing the enjoyment of the game. We need to be in a position where we can compete and be successful going forward. And one of my jobs is to make sure that I've not burdened the club with a burden that doesn't enable us to do that. So the trick for this year is not just to survive this year, but to enable the club and the sport in general to be in a position where it can thrive or survive and thrive, going forward as we move out of this period of history.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, it was one of the points that I was going to make later on. So you kind of beat me to it about the fact that the Scarlets and Exeter are the two only clubs that have made profit in recent years, because sport is often kind of seen as almost the black hole of money, because you do have to, you have to pay players, and players, as they get better in their careers and get the honours and stuff, demand more money. Plus, then there's the whole infrastructure behind getting that team onto the pitch, not just for the stadium and the coaching staff, but the wider community as well to engage. So it was quite interesting to hear you say that it's surplus rather than profit, and the fact that that's being reinvested into all levels of rugby as well. Because one thing that's always kind of really stood out for me, not just as a fan of the Scarlets, since I first went to my dad took me to my first game at the legendary Stradey Park, but it's the way that the club have always continuously developed players, and it is almost seen as that kind of conveyor belt that as I said, sports always seems a bit of a black hole, but actually when you really look at the machine working, it's incredible. So how do you come into that? Because obviously coming from big business, you're now in a really, what I would kind of see is a really different environment, because you have that juggling act between the powers that be of the WRU and the sponsors, as well as that kind of grassroots responsibility as well, and of course the fans. We're a fickle bunch at the best of times. How have you kind of coped with that? I suppose it has been a little bit different, because the stadium hasn't been filled with people and to interact with. But how have you kind of found taking on that challenge?
I mean, if you look at one of the cornerstones of the Scarlets, the brand and the ethos of the club, the region, that development is a key cornerstone. And we talk about it a lot. We have a 20-year-old academy system. We have 650 boys across West Wales and further afield, that we track at under 15s and under 18 levels that are part of our development pathway. We've got half a dozen centre of excellences across the region. And we have some phenomenal talent in the academy, many of whom, train with the senior squad and get brought into the senior squad, and, certainly at least, develop valuable experience and insight into what a pro team looks like and how it operates and runs, and what it's like to be part of that environment as an individual by being part of that environment. We absolutely see continued investment in that pathway as critical to the future success of the region. We are from a fairly small corner of the world. And we look at it in a couple of ways. One is we want to develop talent within the region, not just in terms of rugby skills, but also in terms of individuals. We want to give people, something they can aspire to. And we also take very seriously our role effectively as ambassadors, for the region, for the outpost of the United Kingdom, where we all came from, where many of us still live, and where our families and hearts are from. So we take that very seriously. Selfishly, it's also incredibly beneficial to develop that talent and nurture that talent and identify early. It provides, the conveyor belt is critical to the continued and future success of the Scarlets. I also do think, which we're at the beginning of exploring, as the world and the game and the business of rugby expands globally, I think there's an opportunity for us to leverage the development capability we have and take that overseas, or bring people from overseas into our environment to monetize that. So to actually make money out of it, which again, we can reinvest, but also, to build a diaspora for the Scarlets on a more global basis, as well as actually giving something back to the broader rugby world. So we do look at it, on three angles. Our entire board is, committed to continued development and investment into that pathway. Last year, we invested over £3 million, into that system. It's a massive, massive part of our identity, not just now, but going forward into the future as well.
Most definitely. Now, how did the Scarlets job actually come about then? Because it's not just kind of one of those that they stick on Indeed or something like that and kind of go, do you fancy taking over the hot seat at the Scarlets? How did that come about, and how did you kind of connect with the guys?
So from my perspective, it actually was a fairly traditional process. So I got headhunted. Yeah. The Scarlets board had made a decision. I think it, had come into fruition at the tail end of last year. So actually pre-COVID, that they wanted to bring in an executive chairman. So somebody who has an employment contract, is legally and technically an employee of the club, to sit on top of the organization, to help take the organization, forward into the future. Rugby is about 125 years old, or actually 150. The first 125 years, it was a community game. And clearly, the ethos and the spirit and the large majority of the game is still a community game. But the entire game was a community game. And over the past 25 years, the first iteration of the professional era, the game has largely still been run by the same people, or the same types of people that ran the game for the previous 125 years. So the community folk, have taken, formal positions within the management of the professional piece of the game. And the game ultimately has been supported by benefactors. We're just about to go into a new iteration of the professional game where it's supported by institutional investors. And, CVC is the first big name to the table. Others will follow over the next number of years. And the game is going to transform very significantly. The Scarlets board saw that. They saw that opportunity, and they also saw the need to bring different skill sets in around the table to help, navigate the club through the opportunities that are going to come as part of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think rugby is one of those things that it's always been management by committee. And always seen as a bit of an old boys club, and certainly with the first guest I had on the show, David Moffat, who is quite a controversial figure in Welsh rugby, for bringing in regionalism, and again, one of the things that he said, which I found quite interesting, was the fact that he stopped the committee and their away days, and to cut down on expenses and things like that. And when he left, those things transitioned back in. I suppose it's quite controversial given the fact that you're the head of one of the regions, but all those years ago, what was your take on the big split, going from the normal kind of league structure with probably the 10, 12 teams to then cutting it down to 5 and then ultimately cutting it down to 4 regions? What was your take on that, and I'm sure we'll tread the PC line slightly, being the head of one of the regions yourself.
Yeah, so I did see that interview. I thought it was very interesting, and I'm actually, David's been kind enough to jump on the phone with me and have a chat, as I've been coming into this role, which I'm very appreciative of, because that was an important chapter in the history of the evolution of the game. So it's important to understand what was going on in people's heads, and what were the different twists and turns, and why did we end up where we ended up.
Yeah.
My perspective is, if I look at it simply as a business, and I would be the first person to caveat that with, rugby is much more than a business. It's, if you go to Llanelli, you've been there. It's such a massive part of the town.
Yeah.
Such a massive part of people's well-being, welfare, their weekly cadence, how they spend their money, everything. And if you're from Llanelli, you're from West Wales, wherever you travel around the world, it's part of your, badge of identity.
West is best, as the great Grab said.
Yeah, I would like to position the club as, incredibly inclusive and welcoming to all. Yeah. So, clearly West Wales has a special, part in my heart. But look, from my perspective, everyone's welcome, and nobody's better than anyone else. It's all about, how we pull together, and, how we perform on the field at the end of the day, rather than any God-given right.
Oh, totally.
But, back to your question. If you look at things from a raw business economical standpoint, there are only so many clubs that you can support as professional clubs. And in order for those clubs to be successful, you have to look at, who you're really competing against. And, the reality is, the regions, the clubs in Wales, yes, we do compete with each other, but actually the clubs that we need to be competing against and being successful against on a regular basis, are clubs like Leinster, Glasgow, Toulon, Toulouse, Exeter, Bath, the list goes on. But, we all know who those clubs are. And as the global season starts to come into alignment, and over the next couple of years, we will have, in all likelihood, the beginnings of a World Club Cup competition. You're going to be adding clubs like the Crusaders to that list.
Yeah.
So, as you look at that list and you look at the money that is coming into the game, by definition, we need a more rarefied set of clubs that are well supported, and that doesn't mean simply we pay the players a lot of money, but the entire setup of the squad, the coaching setup, our stadiums, our training facilities, the other things that go around, supporting and making a squad productive, the medical side of things, the nutrition side of things, the physiotherapy, the recovery side of things, all of those things need to be in place so that, we can compete as effectively as possible against those teams. If you look at the Scarlets, I think, we already do a great job of that, but there's still more work to be done. We lost to Toulon away by 5 points.
Yeah. Don't remind me of that. It still hurts.
But I think the way we competed is different to the way that we've competed in previous years in that game. Now, our squad budget, £8 million. Toulon squad budget, €30 million.
It's chalk and cheese at the end of the day. And again, it's always kind of astounded me how much a club like the Scarlets has actually achieved, not just because I am a fan, but when you look at going up against the giants of Toulon, where they have superstar players, they bring in the world champion South Africans, and basically it's a blank check, really, in some cases. And then you look at how much player wages are, to get some decent high profile players, and the actual number of players you need in the squad to actually compete on all fronts as well. So, it's does that get frustrating when you come up against people like Toulon where they have that kind of budget compared to yours?
Well, I mean, clearly, if you just look at the numbers, to come within 5 points away from home with such a discrepancy in terms of squad budget, it tells you we're doing something right.
Yeah.
And that we do a great job of maximizing the resources that we have. And also if you look at that game, no discredit to anyone that was on the pitch that day, because I thought, the team performed incredibly well. Liam Williams wasn't playing. Foxy was not playing. Patch was not playing. We were missing some key players.
Yeah.
Back to squad, one of the challenges we have is because we have so many internationals. We've currently got 13 boys off for Wales, I think, and a couple of others off for some other international teams. That requires us to carry, the way the season's structured today, that requires us to carry a squad of 60 players.
60 players spread over that 8 million budget is that's really raiding the cupboards at times.
Yeah. So there are some things that we need to change, which we don't have control over, but we're attempting to influence. And actually, as I was coming into the game, already we could see some of these. I could see some of these changes, on the horizon, because without some of these changes, there's a limited impact that I can have. But one of CVC's key tenets of its investment thesis is the alignment of the club and the international season on a global basis.
Yeah.
Will it be perfect? I don't know. Is it going to be better? Absolutely. And if we can run a more efficient squad, that works for everyone. It helps us manage our cash resources. The boys also like it too. They want to be playing regularly. And everyone wants a cadence and a structure to the season. If I look at my kids, I got 3 boys, one of whom's birthday is today. I would put them into the casual fan bucket.
Yeah.
So they're not, die hard through and through rugby fans. But, they're very excited for the day that will come, when I can take them down Parker Scarlets. But I'll tell you now, again, no discredit to anyone. If I take them down there and Sanjay, Foxy, Halfpenny, Ken, Jake Ball, if those boys aren't playing, my kids are going to say, Dad, why did you bring me down here?
Yeah.
That's what people want to see. Those boys playing in meaningful competitions. When they show up to the stadium, they want to know, what is this game about today? Where does it fit logically into the structure of the season? They don't want to have to second guess that. And all of those things, I do feel, I am optimistic, will come into play. Not this season, this season's a busted flush. And with Corona, it was always going to be a challenge anyway. But from 2021-22 onwards, I do believe we will have a much more logical, structured shape to the season.
So what's the goal? I know it could be, to win the league and to win Europe and everything like that. But what is the realistic goal? In the next couple of years, for the Scarlets, because obviously you're juggling so many plates and so many challenges. What are the kind of goals that you've outlined?
So clearly, we want to be a winning team.
Yeah.
And winning means making the playoffs of any competition that we exist in. So for us, as of now, it's Pro 14, whatever that's going to become. It's Europe. It's great to be back in the Champions Cup this season. We need to be making the playoffs of that format. And then with the World Club Cup competition coming into focus over the next couple of years, again, we'd want to be in the finals of that competition. And once you get into the finals, then you want to be pushed to be winning.
Yeah.
And there are some things that we need to do structurally, we need to do from a squad perspective, in terms of how we support that squad too. Clearly finances for everyone are going to be a challenge over the next couple of years. So a big part of my job in the background is to ameliorate those challenges and actually not just do that, but come up with ways and initiatives in which we can, not just survive, and then become sustainable, but how we can be successful. And by being successful, again, I'm not going to use the word profit, but we need to be prosperous so that we can make investments. Yeah. And that is not just in player salaries. We're very much a community club. So we need to, support our community. We need to, build an ecosystem that enables that development pathway to continue to be successful. And we do want to create the best environment for the boys to be successful, not just in the Scarlets, but as individuals, in their international careers, and in their careers post-rugby too. So we absolutely want to look at things holistically and be one of the best places, if not the best places, for people to make a decision, to spend their rugby career at.
So a lot's been kind of said about the kind of environments around the likes of Saracens and Exeter, and the environment that players are allowed to flourish in. Talk to us a little bit about the kind of the behind the scenes of the Scarlets, and again, that kind of community feel kind of behind the scenes. What's it like?
Yeah, I mean, there are many aspects to this. The club's got a 150-year history. Produced an incredible roster of legends within the game. We need to do a better job of leveraging that. I am fired up an initiative, to build out an alumni. Pete the Meat Edwards has graciously volunteered, to help us do that, as well as, we've already reached out to a number of different people, with a view to building that community out, engaging them on game day and actually doing, more broader things with that group around the club and, elsewhere across the country and on a global basis, potentially. The development pathway, I talked about, that gives, boys and girls, from the region, the opportunity to, to grow, prosper, and to launch themselves onto the world stage, not just as rugby players, but also as individuals. The opportunity to, take those development pathways and the skills around that, coaching, S&C, all those types of things, and export that effectively or license it. That creates opportunities for people. We're incredibly fortunate to be a stadium-based club, where we have a phenomenal track, match day track in the heart of a 14,500 person, purpose-built rugby stadium, which when it's full is an absolutely phenomenal place to be. We've got an indoor training barn. The playing surface in that barn is actually bigger than at the Welsh setup, because we have 2 full-size dead ball areas. We've got an outdoor training pitch, right outside the stadium, and we're in the process of, building a dome with a 3G pitch right next to the stadium to give us an additional area for training. We've got the gym in the stadium. We've got a chef. We look after the boys well from a nutritional perspective. We've also got an altitude chamber. So, from an environmental perspective, we've got a good setup. There are still some other things that we'd like to do, but, that is a fantastic asset. And then, there's a number of non-match day, non-rugby events that take place at the stadium. It is a great facility. We'd like to do more around that, make it a bit of a business hub, in the region, and give people opportunities, not just around rugby, but around, self-development, commerce, on a more broader basis. And, we recognize our important role, our privileged role within the community. And, that's something we want to respect and continue to pay attention to and, do our bit to help our, corner outpost of the UK, prosper and to give people opportunities, much like I received myself. My dad was a coal miner. My mother ran a retail business, an independent shop. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go to Llandovery College and then, cross the bridge, as I joked about earlier, to go to Bath University and then, launch myself into a business career. But, that was a big step change from, the environment and the path that, my parents had been able to follow.
I mean, the Scarlets have always had a deep-rooted kind of community base, and it's fantastic to see that continuing. You said previously about kind of taking the brand even further, and it is a globally recognised brand. How important is it to have people like Sean Fitzpatrick, for instance, come on board shortly after you were announced? Actually, how important is that someone of his experience and again building the connections with New Zealand rugby as well, with the unfortunate departure of Bradmore to their setup. What's that like?
Yeah, we haven't talked about Fitzy, so I'm glad you bring it up.
Name dropping.
No, I mean, Sean's he is a legend of the game. There's no doubt about it, and he's a great human being. Has been very successful, both in terms of rugby and subsequent business career. So the fact that Sean was so interested in becoming involved with the Scarlets, speaks volumes for the club and the equity that it has within the rugby world. Sean's fortunate enough to be able to pick and choose what he gets involved with. So he looked at the club and he really came down. He soaked it up. Spent some time with the boys and made a very personal but well thought through decision to get involved with the club. From our perspective, it's another statement as to the fact that even though we're from this corner post of the UK, we're very forward looking. Everyone is welcome. We want to continue to develop the brand recognition of the club and the impact that it has on rugby on a global basis. It's already got a good brand and it's already a well-respected, well-liked brand around the world, but that's something we can further capitalize upon. And Sean, is clearly able to provide incredibly valuable insight into, I'm not even going to say high performance environments, I'm going to say ultra high performance environments. The rugby world in general, helping solidify that relationship with New Zealand Rugby Union and also a number of other relationships across the world. Sean, the boys like having him around. He's a valuable asset for them, not just from a rugby perspective, but also in terms of what they might be looking to do in their future careers, post rugby. And he's, to be blunt, he's a good door opener, for sponsorship conversations. Sean can get to anyone. Most people on the planet are willing to take a coffee or a lunch or grab a beer with Sean Fitzpatrick. So he and I have been able to tag team really well, and he's a fantastic asset for the club, and he's been a great individual to get to know over the past couple of months and a pleasure to work with. How
often do you remind him of the 9-3 victory?
So in response to that, last week I had dinner with him and he dug this out of his garage. So this is a program for the 1989 game, which I don't know if you were at. I actually was at 31 years ago to the day today.
Really?
That game was played. I remember the weather was absolutely terrible. But we talk about New Zealand. His father was part of the All Blacks team. That was the last All Blacks team to lose to Wales. And that rankled his father till the day that he died.
Imagine.
Sean told me a story. I think Cliff Morgan phoned him up at home in New Zealand to try and invite him to an anniversary dinner. I think it was maybe 50 years or 40 years. I can't quite remember. And his dad swore at Cliff, slammed the phone down. He wouldn't even countenance, attending the dinner. That's how much it hurt. But Sean shared all the stories about 72. He's got his own stories about 89.
Revenge, yeah.
I think is it 97 when we got absolutely tuned by the All Blacks. He travelled on that tour, but towards the end of his career, and he was injured and he didn't play. But he remembers that scoreline as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But he has a lot of admiration for the club, and super excited about, helping us push forward.
Now, there are rumours in some quarters that there's a chance of playing the All Blacks at some stage to celebrate that 9-3 victory. Care to elaborate or shed some light?
It would be absolutely amazing, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
The year before the World Cup, the All Blacks are looking to tour the Northern Hemisphere, which is no surprise. So if we could somehow manage to, get a commitment to get a game played, it would be absolutely fantastic. 50 years since the 9-3 victory in 72. It would also coincide with the 150th anniversary season for the club. Which would be a tremendous way to celebrate that season. So it would be fantastic. It is something we're working on, but not quite set in stone as of yet.
Stick me down for a pair of tickets then.
I think there'll be I think we'll need to build another 14,500 seats somehow if that game comes together.
Health and safety out the window is fine. We'll pack them into the rafters. I mean, we could talk forever and a day about the Scarlets because it's just a tremendous club and it's a big part of my kind of rugby history and actually many great memories down the old Parker Scarlets and the new ground as well. Parker Scarlets, I called it Straddy Park. Oh, terrible. Thank you for not correcting me. One thing I always ask people who come on the show is about 3 tips that they can give to people in business. And I think with your background of building a business, selling a business, and then kind of really, as you said, kind of taking that pivot into the world of sports as well, what kind of 3 tips would you kind of give people?
So I think, one of the things everyone talks about is, stick to what you know. I would slightly modify that with, if you look at me getting involved with the Scarlets, I have a broader business background now than I would have had, 10, 15, 25 years ago. And I think that what I'm finding is as you get older and you do get involved with more things, how relevant that experience is to almost any environment.
Yeah.
So, so my view, the first response would be, stick to what you know. You're not going to be able to do a complete moonshot, but, there's a lot to be said for actually, learning new things. If you can bring some of your experiences and some of your history with you to help benefit a new objective, activity, business, whatever it is, I think it is powerful to do something new. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how relevant my experience has been to the Scarlets.
Yeah.
History will tell if that actually plays out.
Very, very, very true. Yeah.
I think the second thing is, people are so important. You've got to work with people who you trust, who you respect, who you can communicate to, who are ideally comfortable enough in their own skin, just to be honest with each other. I'm, as I've got older and I think, having spent my career in technology, I'm not one for procrastinating or wasting time or just not telling people what I'm actually thinking. I've been fortunate enough, whilst remaining respectful, I've not worked in a corporation where, people have had to decipher, wonder what he is really trying to tell me.
Yeah.
The truth is the truth.
Yeah.
And if you have a purpose and a goal, that provides focus and objectivity, that allows you to just get on with it. And one of the things I love about the Scarlets is, the sense of purpose is so clear. It's just about having a winning team.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
And everything needs to drive towards that goal. So the second thing for me is, people are super, super important. The third thing, which is tricky because you can't always control this, but, timing is really, really important. And, sometimes you just got to take a punt.
Yeah.
But you can't beat the market. And what I mean by that is, you can't defy the laws of physics. In the tech world, you could create a phenomenal piece of technology. Everyone knows about examples like Uber, Amazon. But, if you look at their timing, they were only able to be successful, get traction, because of evolutions in technology and consumer habits. Amazon started off selling books because, that's the most non-perishable, commoditized, returnable object on the planet.
Yeah.
They've only now, 20 years later, been able to evolve into, selling a much broader array of products. And, we've been able to do that on an incredible basis as well. Uber, when it first started off, was highly manutronic. So in other words, it was very little automation.
Yeah.
And it launched in a very safe, controlled environment, which is the city of Portland in Oregon. So as I looked at Rugby, as I said to the board as I was going through the process, I said, look, if you called me 2 years ago, I'd have been absolutely the wrong person for this job. Because I'm not a backroom politician. I'm not a committee man. I don't have any blazers with gold buttons sewn onto them. And I'm not interested in doing that. I just want to get stuff done.
Yeah.
So, I did look hard at it, despite the fact that, on the tin it said the Scarlets, which clearly was a bright, shiny object for me. I had to look critically and think, okay, can I make an impact to this business? So private equity is coming into the game. I just worked with private equity and led a successful exit for a private equity firm. So I know how that works. I know how to work with private equity. I know how to deliver a return.
Yeah.
The global season is changing, which enables us to look at the club, much more as a business and structure it effectively. The club had already been, break even, mildly profitable. So that provided a good basis. I was not expected to come in and deliver a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
I also thought that, COVID was an opportunity. As difficult as it is, it provides a once in a lifetime, once in 100-year opportunity for people to plant their feet on the ground and just be honest about what needs to get done. So I felt the timing was good. And I also felt, selfishly, now for me was the time to get involved. If I sat back, did something else for another 5 years and then tried to get involved, this cycle would have been gone through. And then I would have effectively been competing with people who had gone through this cycle and had that experience. The reality is at this point in time within rugby, nobody has this experience, but I have components of it from other worlds.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited about, helping the Scarlets navigate through this period of time. So
Brilliant.
yeah, three things for me. One is having some knowledge you can leverage, but also don't be afraid to try new things. Secondly, doing it with the right people. And then thirdly, timing.
Fantastic. What a really interesting view as well on the timing side of things, and I think having talked with you previously before this call and actually hearing your answers during it, I think the Scarlets are in safe hands, in very level-headed safe hands, which as a fan, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Matthew. And look, what I would emphasize too, back to my second point about people, I as I went through the process, I was really, really, and this is not me being sycophantic, genuinely, this is part of my due diligence qualification and, assessment as to whether I could be successful. There's a really strong, cohesive, functioning board at the Scarlets.
Yeah.
Right. With very little divergence. Healthy debate? Absolutely. But ultimately, everyone's pulling in the right direction. And there's been a couple of people that have been, with the club for, 25 years, people like Hugh Evans and Ron Jones. And, they are still enthusiastic, supportive, willing to give up time, open to new ideas. And that's really powerful because you can't do it alone. So the board is really strong. And then, all through the club at all aspects, there are phenomenal people. John Daniels, the GM of Rugby, Philip Morgan, the COO, Ken Owens, the club captain, who we've now, put onto the board. He's phenomenal within the club and across the region as a whole. The list goes on and on. There are some phenomenal people around the club. As you walk in, you just feel welcome. It's a great place to spend time. And, it's a real privilege to be given the opportunity to get involved.
Definitely. I've always found that, even though this might be a little bit of a selfish point of view, but I've always found the Scarlets has been a bit more forward-thinking than other boards as well. When I used to be a board member of Pre-16, the Supporters Trust, the fact that we were actually invited to board meetings, not to have a say or anything like that, but just to have an insight. And I think having that connection, I worked with Supporters Trust for many, many years in different sports. And actually, the closest most of them ever got to the boardroom was if they could muster up enough money to buy some form of shares to buy a place, which is a very expensive way to get on that. But actually, being invited as a Supporters Trust to be part of that and to kind of see into that world, that was a few years ago, and that was very incredibly innovative then, because it closes the gap. So I think the future's very Scarlet. Let's say that.
No, thank you. And a massive part of our culture is there's only one version of the truth. We share our finances with the entire club. Going through COVID, you got nowhere to hide, and you need everyone to be on board and everyone to know the reality. So we try and be as transparent as possible. Having Ken now in the board meets, he's able, if the boys have got any questions, about how the club's being run, Ken has seen it all. I mean, he gets the full board papers, so he knows exactly, how the club is being run. And it was interesting. So he's only been coming to the board meetings the past couple of months, but I asked him after his first board sessions, how was it? And he said, it was good. He said, it was really good. He said, I'm just really surprised at how little you talk about rugby. Because the board is not a fan club. I mean, clearly we all love the game, but we're there to run a business, right?
Very, very true. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, we could talk forever and a day, but I'm very conscious that it's your son's birthday and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We'll have to have you back for a second episode. But thank you so much for your time today, Simon, and for the insight that you've kind of given, not just from a fan point of view, but from the wider business community as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. Thanks for reaching out, and thanks for enabling me to engage with the fans, the supporter base, the community, through this media. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Check out the next episodes coming soon, guys, and subscribe to the channel. But once again, thank you, Simon, for joining us.
Thanks, Matthew. Bye.